I'm telling you.
Okay, all right,
3
she
days
said.
before you go, he told me, I said, I'm going to tell you, Alan.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the History Club. And today we have a very interesting, talented speaker, my colleague, Tartaglia. Cy graduated from St. John's University with a BBA degree. And then he had an MA and an MS. He has an MA and an MS from LIU. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps. He guarded the American Embassy in Tel Aviv. Great assignment. And he also worked for the New York City Police Department, and he was a sergeant with Internal Affairs, and an educator in the New York City school system.
Thank you so much, Robert. All right. This is a very interesting, I think, period of American history. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s. We had a depression first, a crash in 1929, and 2 or 3 years later comes the Dust Bowl, when one of the greatest migrations ever from the United States, from one part of the United States to another. Okay. It's known as the dirty 30s. It's a period of severe dust storms that greatly damaged the ecology and the agriculture of the United States and Canadian prairies. Not too much Canada, but they did. During the 1930s, severe drought and a failure to apply dry land farming methods to prevent the erosion. It calls the Aeolian process caused this phenomenon. Aeolus is a, I think that's how I pronounce it, is a Greek god of the wind that was taken from, I guess, Greek mythology, Greek god of the wind. This occurred during the Great Depression, when we had tons of problems, including Europe and Asia. Changes to America evolved, ripping at its seams. The strength and vitality of the Americas came through, considering the heavy load of problems we had. The Aeolian, as I said, the Aeolian process pertains to the wind activity in the study of geology and weather, specific to the wind's ability to shape the surface of the earth. Get to the point I have to wear glasses now.
No shame.
This is ground level. This is not the clouds. This is not the clouds. You can see it's ground on the ground. This is Lamar, California. Dust covered many agricultural communities where the land became untillable. Dust, sand, and other debris simply was swept up by the winds and went to far-flung places. The Wizard of Oz movie was based on this theme, to transport Judy, the spare of Julie Garden. I'll show you. There is a scene from the Wizard of Oz. Tornado in Kansas and the Midwest, many objects were swept away and buried in the dust and sand. The worst man-made ecological disaster in American history. When a frenzied wheat boom will explain out how the wheat farmers partly caused this on the southern plains, followed by a decade-long drought during the 1930s, nearly swept away the breadbasket of the nation. Dorothy was swept away, and agricultural prosperity vanished. Look at this. This man is caught in the opening. This is frightening when you're caught in the opening. You got the tons and tons and millions of tons of dust chasing him up down the road, dirt road. A scary, threatening cloud of dust behind the farmer. He's running for his life. And breathing that dust is somewhat like breathing in poison gas. Life stops during and after these storms. Just imagine, look at that cloud that's behind him, my God almighty. Dust cloud went from ground level to 10,000 feet. It even affected aircraft. Aircraft, they're not jets, they can go 10,000 feet. It's easy to go jet over 10,000 feet, but those days it was a little bit difficult. So you can get the idea of the horrible condition of the Dust Bowl. I wanted to start out with this presentation. Again, this is ground level, not in the clouds. Aircraft were in danger because the dust rising to great heights. Dust Bowl was known as the Dirty 30s, were a period of severe dust storms that greatly damaged the ecosystem and the agriculture of the American and Canadian prairies during the 1930s. Severe drought. Much of the plains had been plowed up in the decade before the 1930s as wheat cropping expanded west. Now, we'll explain that later on. Wheat became a very big industry. The farmers were making a lot of money. It started from World War I demand, and when the motorized plow came in, the tractor, then they started tilling more and more and more land. Now they were killing natural grasses that held moisture in, that held the wind in, to plant wheat with a profit motive. What do you call it? Natural prairie grasses can survive drought, but we can't, and it just dried up. Look at that picture, my God, that this is sand covering the barn. I'm not kidding when they said dust, wind-driven dust piled up and used to inter body. In other words, when someone died, they can no longer die. They just left them, and the wind and the dust just buried them in a field. Got to be as much as 4 feet of dust and wind and sand. Dust transport by the wind is not a uniform process, but may occur in different modes according to source area conditions. These differences are expressed in terms of grain size. In other words, that's technical. In other words, the dust is all different kinds, all different sizes, and it inundates a community very, very rapidly. The term Dust Bowl was coined by a reporter in the mid-1930s and referred to the plains of western Kansas, southeastern Colorado, the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma, and northeastern New Mexico. By the early 1930s, the grassy plains of the region have been overplowed by farmers and overgrazed by cattle and sheep. The resulting soil erosion, combined with an 8-year drought, which began in 1931, the year it was born, created a dire situation for farmers and ranchers. Crops and businesses failed, and an increasing number of dust storms made people and animals sick. Many residents fled the region in search of work in other states such as California. Hollywood and The Grapes of Wrath was based on this thing. States that affected suffered greatly in the 1930s, both from escalating joblessness and severe drought that for several years denied much of the Great Plains sufficient rain to produce its usual complement of wheat and cotton. The drought also produced a spectacular ecological disaster. Wind-driven dust storms had arisen on a broad swath of counties in western Kansas and the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles. On several occasions between 1933 and 35, each time filling air with millions of tons of finely plowed topsoil and blackening skies for thousands of miles. It reached New York, by the way. Matter of fact, it reached about 50 to 100 miles out to sea. You had ships out to sea in the Atlantic Ocean. The decks were covered with dust and sand. That's how widespread it was. The dust storm brought press attention and later government intervention to the affected area, soon known as the Dust Bowl. Causes of the Dust Bowl. Okay, you had drought in the Great Plains for several years, overgrazing of livestock, overplowing of fields, destroyed the natural grass and soil. In other words, bad dirt. Drought and overplowing were the main culprits, with others adding in for the kill. Each year, the process of farming begins with preparing the soil to be seeded. But for many years, farmers have plowed the soil too fine. They contributed to the creation of dust. But why too fine? You had the mechanized plow. Before you had the horse-drawn wagons. Couldn't go that, it went deep enough, not deep. But now you had the mechanized plow would go deeper, and that turned the soil so bad. You ended up with bad seed beds after plowing it. Wind-blown dust. Small particles, dust can be swept high in the atmosphere by the wind and can be kept suspended in the air for long periods of time. Look at the date. Dust storms in June 13, 2002. Still happening. There's another one that I got, 2012. Still happening. So not as bad as in the 1930s, but it's still happening. Even recently, the Dust Bowl in the southeast. This shows the extent of poor soil conservation and the negative environmental impact. As you see by the data, it's still happening. Okay, poor agricultural practices. We went through that, but it's important to rehash it again. Plains grassland had been deeply plowed and planted for wheat. Didn't belong there, the wheat, but the grassland was to prevent dust storms, held the soil together. The ground cover was held and the soil in place was gone. The ground cover was gone. The plain wind whipped across the fields, raising billowing clouds of dust in the skies. Okay. Farmers plowed more and more as farm prices dropped. Farm prices were dropping. Now these farmers had mortgages on farms, on tractors. They were buying tractors, and they rather than go broke, they started to keep on plowing. They bought more and more wheat. Oh, they owed so much money for the machine and extra land they purchased that they kept plowing until the earth could no longer support crops. Individual in Oklahoma said the Dust Bowl incident was caused by over-farming. People want to believe that the planet will punish humans for their sins when they're not making profits of it. Out of it. Wind-blown sediments. Wind, like moving water, is turbulent and able to pick up sand and dust and transfer it to another location. However, wind is not confined to a stream channel like water. Therefore, wind can spread sediment over a larger area. Wind is erratic and subject to many outside influences. Winds blow erratically, and in many cases, it is not predictable. The power of strong winds similar to hurricane force can be highly destructive. Now, scientists interfered, come in. They said scientists found two main reasons for the drought. A winter high-pressure system over the west coast that blocked precipitation, and spring dust storms that suppressed rainfall. They also blamed El Nino. Later on, I will come across that. Okay. The dust bowl was caused by several economic and agricultural factors, including federal and land policies, changes in regional weather, farm economics, and other cultural factors. After the Civil War, a series of federal land grants coaxed pioneers west by incentivizing the farming on the Great Plains. We're putting an incentive to go to the Great Plains. The Homestead Act of 1862, way back then, which provided settlers with 160 acres of land, was followed by the Kincaid Act of 1904 and the Enlarged Homestead Act of 1909. These acts led to a massive influx of new and inexperienced farmers across the Great Plains. Many of these late 19th and early 20th century settlers lived by the superstition, rain will follow the plow. Immigrants, land speculators, politics, and even some scientists believed that the homesteading and agriculture would permanently affect the climate of the semi-arid Great Plains region, making it conducive to farming. Now, Roosevelt was at a dilemma. Okay, when he took office, he had enough to worry about. Depression and falling prices because of overproduction, unemployment, which was vast. Then you had the march of dictators and threats to democracy. Now comes the Dust Bowl, and they added misery to America, a vital time in America. At that time, we were not in debt and had enough financial room to maneuver. We were a credit nation, meaning the entire world, just about the entire world owed us money. We didn't know. And had a cumulative balance of payments surplus. A credited nation has a positive net investment after recording all their financial transactions. Complete and the rest of the rest, in other words, we did not owe. They owed us. There was an interesting presentation the other day by about how we almost went to war with England in the 1930s. Over $14 billion they owed us that they didn't have. The plow cut to the soil equivalent to one plow, mechanical plow, equivalent to 20 horse teams. Now, there's about 3 or 4 horses to a horse team. One plow would take the place of 80 horses in a day, at a time. Farmers were encouraged to grow more crops as a result of first of all, World War I demands. They introduced to the motorized plow and profits rose. They bought more land and plows until prices dropped because of oversupply. Farmers had big mortgages to pay and machinery to pay off that they bought on credit. Technology aided society, but it also took a toll on progress, as the environment suffered from overplowing. Plow, also spelled spelled two ways, P-L-O-W or P-L-O-U-G-H. Most important agricultural implement since the beginning of history. It made crops. You needed to plow the field, but so there's such thing as overplowing. There's a documentary I guess most of us saw on PBS. The plow that broke the plains. This was shown on PBS, and it was an eye-opener about 4 or 5 years ago. I think it ran a number of times. Hubert Humphrey once said he learned economics in a dust storm. No, overplowing began with the food demands of World War I. Farmers made huge profits and wanted to continue. I don't blame them for farm prosperity. Now, is this the enemy or a savior? Tractor led to widespread profits in the beginning and chaos in the end. Efficient instrument to increase the food supply if weather and food prices cooperate. From horses to oxen to the mechanical plow, that was a friend of civilization, or was it? Or was it? An enemy? Maybe. Tall prairie grass once protected the topsoil of the Midwest. But once farmers settled prairies, they plowed over 5.2 million acres of the deep-rooted prairie grasses. 5.2 million that would protect the environment, and now it went to wheat. This is the plow, the mechanical plow, a huge one. Okay, 1927, before plowing created the Dust Bowl, making money from crops, so grow more and more until the market collapses. In the 1910s and the 1920s, the Southern Plains were the last frontier of the agriculture, according to the government. When rising wheat prices and a war in Europe, a series of unusually wet years and generous federal farm policy created a land boom. That's in the early 1920s, 10s. The great plow up that turned 20 million acres of thick native grass into wheat fields. Newcomers came in and they didn't know what they were doing. They were just plowing and plowing and plowing without using scientific farming. When things were good, how happy they were, they got a lot of land, a lot of. Before the dust and drought brought hardships, life was good on the farm. In the 1910s and 1920s, the Southern Plains were the last frontier of agriculture, according to the government. The great plow up that turned 5 million into grassland into wheatland was a disaster. Okay, fast on the soil erosion and degradation. Soil erosion, moving the soil components, especially litter and topsoil, from one place to another. Losing topsoil makes soil less fertile and less able to hold water. While soil is potentially the renewable resource, it takes long periods of time to form topsoil. Typically 200 to 1,000 years to form 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch of topsoil. The northern plains were not so badly affected. The southern plains were. The drought-prone agriculture were no strangers to the north. Poor agricultural practices and years of sustained drought caused the Dust Bowl. Dust Bowl economics. More than 2/3 were farmers. Total systems estimated at $1 billion in 1930s. I know what that is today. That's maybe 50, 30, 40, 50 billion at today's prices. Report found that losses in the Dust Bowl affected the entire national economy. 1 billion, 21% of all rural families of Great Plains received federal aid. Bank cannot give people a hand, cannot give you hard-earned money back because too many loans. Not only federal assistance, I'm choking my eyes. Not only federal assistance, also the human misery engendered. However, broad calculations and estimates can provide valuable generalization of the economic impact of 1930s. In 1937, the WPA reported that drought was the principal reason for the economic relief assistance for the Great Plains during the 1930s. Here's where the states that were it happened. You had Colorado, Kansas, New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma. The image of the extent of the Dust Bowl. Quite a big area. There's a man sitting in the field before it happened, enjoying himself. Dust Bowl's damage. Well, the red is where it started, and the yellow and the brown and the sort of lights is how it affected. It went up to Canada. I didn't hear anything of it affecting Mexico, but it affected the Canadian border to close to Canada. About 11 states affected directly, but the entire nation suffered the economic consequences. Some 850 million tons of topsoil blew away in 1935 alone. 850 million tons. Unless something's done, the government report predicted the Western Plains will be as arid as the Arabian Desert. The government response included Civilian Conservation Corps and other programs, and asking farmers to try new methods. He's trying to escape the dust. He's driving a truck, trying to get away. He's caught in the open. If he gets caught in the open, wow. Dust pneumonia, a lot of things can happen. Dust chasing a truck. No way avoiding pervasive dust storms. Neither man nor beast was immune. Dust permeated any structure that even had the most minute cracks in the structure. Went through doors, it went through windows, it went through everything. Pervasive dust ruined lives. That's a farm. It's an abandoned farm, I think it says. It was all but abandoned, and there was no escaping the all-encompassing dust storms. The extreme damage to the environment was incalculable. Foreclosures abounded. Even the banks had difficulty selling farms because they could not produce income for years. Banks failed also, so it affected everybody. Farmers and banks. Too dry to plant. Drought and dust. Farmers looking over at parched land, probably contemplating a move west. As the land could not support his family, what was he to do? You cannot stay and plant. No food and wells, no food, and the wells were contaminated with dust and sand. The option was to stay and starve or move on, taking chances at survival. Here's a dust storm coming into a town, inundating farms and towns with an economic standstill. As I said, this is ground level. You can see what the farms are there, the buildings. Imagine living through that disaster. Most people fled for their life and left much behind, and there was not much to do when this dust storm hit. This is catastrophic. Catastrophic. Ground level. Dust storm approaching a rural town. Look at that wall of dust and dirt coming into a town. When this happens, this is a little scientific explanation. I really don't understand, but I'll say. This happens when larger sand grains typically lose electrons to the lighter dust particles, giving the dust a negative charge. The dust particles are blown high into the air more readily, whereas the now positively charged sand grains usually remain close to the ground level. I really don't understand that. I hope you do. What do? You run or you drive away. Heavy black clouds over the Texas Panhandle. Pervasive condition that could only be handled by taking shelter. Where the shelter is, I don't know. I don't know. Getting together, but to leave a court. The practice was to, when you're going to migrate west, you got together more or less in caravans, 20, 30 cars. But in this case, the photographer said they got together and they were caught in a dust storm. They had to go far to get away from the ubiquitous dust and winds. Taking confident numbers did not help much as the dust permeated everything. So they try to go to California in caravans. If you by yourself, you could get in trouble. This is Ulysses, Kansas, 1935. The entire town was swept in a raging dust storm. You need the strength of Ulysses to cope with this. To this day, Ulysses is in a weather dilemma as 4-inch hailstones bombarded the area. It's in a bad weather area. Why people, I don't know if the people still live there, I imagine they do. This is Rolla, Kansas. It's farmland. The state had hit a number of times, as were many farm communities. I mean, this is coming into your town. A great dust, you can do nothing about it. Farmland turned to dust. Extreme measures to soil conservation had to be met before the soil could yield crops. In 1935, Congress passed the Soil Conservation Bureau in the Department of Agriculture. They put another soil conservation, just mainly to preserve the soil. This is what's going on. The government did not take action. There was a novel, Devil in the Dust. I think in high school or before, I think we all were required to read that. Novels centered around the dust storms and the after effects. A dust devil is a strong, well-formed, and relatively long-lived whirlwind raging in a small, half a meter. By the way, it's like a tornado. It revolves up. It doesn't last long, but I think that the Wizard of Oz took that for Dorothy in the dust devil. Now look at the devastation. Farmland, you can't go back to that. That's about 4 feet of dust. Farmland's covered in dust. Little or no cultivation ongoing. The Great Migration started. Migration to the West Coast, mainly to California. And that had a lot of economic impacts. Few alternatives when this happens, as food cannot grow in sand and without water. Thus, the Great Migration started during a major depression, which was doubly chaotic. They issued gas masks on the southern plains, used by the government as tuberculosis and other lung diseases escalated. Also to keep the sand out of stomachs. Remind me of World War I trench warfare as gas masks needed. Here the enemy disregarded the gas mask, but gas masks would prevent pneumonia. That was the big problem there. What time of day is it? Day becomes night in the West as breathing and pulmonary problems affected the entire population. These problems also affected food animals, and they suffered as humans, seriously disrupting the food chain. Running away seemed to be the only sane path. Here is a town about to be drowned in the dust. Dust inundated all phases of living. It was truly a dust bowl of huge proportions. Storm is coming. Again, it's coming. That is an understatement, as the toxicity blowing around it was deadly. The dust got in every crack and crevice, including doors and windows. Children were particularly vulnerable, along with seniors. Dust Bowl. Houses were shut tight and cloths wedged around doors and windows, but the dust came in so thinly that it could not be seen in the air, and it settled like pollen on chairs and tables and on the dishes. This is John Steinbeck in The Grapes of Red. A quote taken from him. The reality of weather on humanity and daily living, as John Steinbeck saw it. This is like, I've seen this maybe hundreds of times. A young lady in the prime of life, now semi-starved, and aging beyond her years. Her eyes reveal the hardships. The photo appears in papers and magazines and illustrated the human toll that the Dust Bowl took. Human misery. Dust Bowl caused misery and poverty to millions of people. Humanity worldwide had little thoughts of farm conservation. The feeling was, where the plow goes, the rains will come. This was proven false decades before. The advent of the mechanical plow blinded farmers as they saw vast profits with technology. Farmers saw huge profits from abundant crops. The law of nature and economics come to play. Rain does not necessarily follow the plow, except if you are blinded by profits to be made and have a shallow perception of reality. Okay. Some went to cities. General information, they talk about the migration. Some went to the cities, but many decided to head west. In fact, these were farmers. They couldn't find a good life in the city, so they wanted to go west where it was more agriculture California. In fact, during the 1930s, hundreds of thousands left the plains for the West Coast. So many migrated from Oklahoma they were called Okies in the popular press. For years, California, Oregon, and Washington have been growing. Many who were pushed off the plains were pulled west because they had relatives who had moved to coastal areas. And the boost of California had advertised state offered perfect climate and employment. Well, when they got there, they found out all about wage economics. Feeding children, soup kitchens and roadkills. Roadkills, those are killed by cars, whatever. That's what they relegated to. Picking up dead deer, whatever was killed by a car or a truck. Or the only means of survival is dust and sand permeated all the stored food. This photo shows children being fed. Federal and state soup kitchens were a good godsend, especially for children. Rural kids were devoured even when their stomach was sand-ridden. In the mid-1930s, state and federal government were also operating them. Soup kitchens served mainly soup and bread. It was economical, more economical. Soup and bread, right? You're not going to say steak, chicken, whatever you do, soup and bread. It makes, now this photo, that woman's face gets me. I see the look of despair here. Sadness in her eyes and face. To me, it's an unforgettable picture. A state that suffered greatly in the early 1930s, both from escalating joblessness and severe drought on the Great Plains. The drought also produced a particular ecological disaster. Wind-driven dust had risen, broad swept the county, of course the southern plains. But I look at that face, I said, wow, this woman is really in despair. I look at these three kids and I say, you know what, that's the face of the greatest generation. These kids were soldiers in World War II. But look what they faced in the early 1930s. The human cost included children. Farm families were uprooted. Remember, these children were the backbone of the greatest generation and provided manpower for World War II. Look at sadness is imprinted in their faces. But they're clean. They're clean and well, nice, preserved clothes. Most lists about the Dust Bowl focus on how the Depression era affected the lives of adults. Children, however, were tremendously affected during the Dust Bowl era and migration as well. When the middle of America began suffering from drought, land dispossession, and poverty, families struggled economically and financially. Families were broken up. They just could not stay together. They tried to stay together. You sent children to family someplace as much as you can, but it was stressful. The struggle that children faced did not only occur at home, struggles are present at school too. Schools in the Dust Bowl states suffer from extreme wind and dust, making it problematic for children to travel to and from school. In school, children had a tremendous problem with their books, and they were faded and filled with dust. Imagine opening a book full of dust and sand. And so when it came to recreation, recess for the children was not very pleasurable. In fact, once you graduate 8th grade, most never went to high school. They had to go back to the farm. That's how bad it was. Poverty personified. Families like this migrated out to the west. They were called Okies. Many came from Oklahoma with only farm skills and a ton of debt. They owed money for their land, they owed money for their tractors. Most could not pay the mortgage incurred, along with the loans on their tractors. No crops meant no income. Measures were later taken to prevent this type of land and crop speculation. The look of poverty is chilling. I look at their faces, wow. This photo is also used to show the face of the Depression. They use it both ways. What happened at the same time? The face, the strength of America showed that we fought the Depression and Dust Bowl at the same time while preparing for World War II. The New Deal employed a lot of landscape artists. So they went out, they painted. There's an artist and rendition worked 1,000 words. The artist showed the lines of deprivation and the soil erosion that transplanted to starvation. Rendition of the damage to land, machinery and structures. There you go, my eyes. The dust was truly all-encompassing and deadly. Changed America quickly in reliance on government programs. The New Deal, government programs. Another artist's rendition. Landscape artists drew pictures of the Dust Bowl. Some artists were subsidized by the government to paint the dreary scenes of hardship. They show you that snakes living off the innards of the cows, and it's disgusting, really. Yeah, wait, look at that wasteland. That used to be farmland. That used to be farmland, untillable now. And 100 million acres of land became wasteland. At the double whammy of drought and depression deepened on the Great Plains, more and more farmers gave up what were forced off their lands. In addition, the relentless march of new tractors meant that the farmers who were able to scrape together enough money to buy a tractor and could buy out their neighbor. You had enough money to buy a tractor, you bought out your neighbors. But in the long run, it didn't work out. Fewer farmers could farm more land. Where would those who left, who had to give them, where did they go? What would they to do?
California.
Well, you got more, scientific farming. Less farmers, more crops. That's why they build houses in the homes in these towns. They made residential communities. 4 feet of dust. Artist rendition to show the intricate details of the Dust Bowl. 3 to 4 feet of dust and sand covered white areas, so life was impossible. Machinery was buried and unusable. You can't use that machinery, although it's an artist's rendition, but you can't use that machinery. You couldn't use the motor's just full of sand and dirt. Now we come to religion and the Dust Bowl. There were many well-intentioned clergymen asking people to turn to God for aid. However, many of the pretenders came out of the woodwork to profit from bad economic times. When the business cycle goes up, religious attendance goes down, and vice versa. The good mystery is why. The author believed that the Dust Bowl was some sort of heavenly response to how people lived their lives in the good times, neglecting God. Okay. Believe that if you want to. During the Dust Bowl, many people lost hope. Even as some families left their farms, others gained strength from community churches. No one had money, but farm families took care of each other, as well as their church minister. Preachers were paid very little or nothing at all. In the 1930s, people who went to church often invited the minister and his family to simple farm meals with foods from the garden. Churches were usually a center of community and social life. When things were bad, that's what you did. You gathered around whatever you wanted, either church or synagogue or whatever, community association. You tend to reach out. Answers to hardships usually give rise to more religious activities. The Dust Bowl was an answer to the carefree life of relative prosperity. Praying for rain. In dire circumstances, one tries everything to alleviate suffering. Here's another article about religion during the Dust Bowl. The author believed that the Dust Bowl was some sort of heavenly response. No, I think I said that one. Oh, here's prayer meeting in the Dust Bowl area to pray for rain and forgiveness in times of distress. People clutch for straws and examine their conscience. This is a famous American Gothic. Never to bring religion into the Depression years along with the Dust Bowl. Prayer did very little. They praying for rain. Didn't come. Remember that picture with, I forget that famous actor, when rain came and they all, I saw this about the 1940s.
Mitchum, Robert Mitchum, the Rainmaker?
Yeah, something like that. And they got on their knees and they prayed to, well, okay. Foreclosures, okay. Weather and overplowing led to devastation of barren soil that turned to dust. You'll see some of the worst cases of foreclosure that led to abject poverty and near starvation. Foreclosures were a problem when the economy goes sour. Farm foreclosure became a disturbingly routine feature of rural life between 1929 and 1933. A third of all American farmers lost their farms in the worst disaster hit American agriculture. Hundreds of thousands of farm-owning families had their hard-earned land seized from under them. A record number of foreclosures in the late 1920s and 30s disillusioned farmers and contributed to unprecedented degree of federal aid. Farms borrowed to buy machinery. We went through that, but you can see that when you borrow, you gotta pay. And if the farmer's not producing a yield, you have no money to pay for not only for the farm, the extra land, and the machinery. Scientific farming later brought back much of the farm economy, as did World War II. Agriculture was a profitable source of income for farmers and the country in the USA during the 1920s. However, this all changed when new machinery was developed. Government policies were introduced, and the effect of World War I had a great impact on the overproduction, which was one of the many reasons which caused a huge decline in agriculture and economy. Overproduction. Many farm families couldn't meet their mortgage payments. The land was exhausted with mechanical plow plus a drought, and you had a recipe for disaster. Well, the average foreclosure rate between 1913 and 1920 was 3.2 per thousand. It jumped to 17.4 per thousand in 1920, and by 1933 reached 38.8 per thousand farms. That just went up greatly. American exodus. Okies going west to escape poverty. California took many of the poverty-stricken migrants. Load the family car and hope sands and dust did not cause. By the way, gas was about under 10 cents a gallon if you could afford it. It did not cause more engine problems along the way. And Okie, we know from Oklahoma, they got the name that went west. Unable to withdraw money from the banks and not getting enough unemployment to live on, people had no choice but to sell their farms. Cold, hard economics without a safety net. Farm foreclosures. During the Great Depression, farm foreclosure became a disturbingly routine feature of life. As we mentioned before, thousands of tough people lost their farms and now went from relative prosperity into poverty. This is a hero to many because they robbed banks and foreclosed on farms. Bonnie and Clyde were considered Dust Bowl heroes. Gangsters came to play during the era and took on a mantle of Robin Hood. This is a specious argument, and as they murdered many innocent people who got in their way, only want to make a living. I put this there, I don't want to put this there, but I want to show some sort of grandfatherly pride. One of my grandsons played young Clyde on Broadway. It only lasted a month on Broadway, but he was on Broadway so I put it in just to be a little proud. Okay. Where did they go for economics and safety? Mostly west to pick fruit in California. Minimal migration eastward. You could see the line, they're going west. Very few going east. There was nothing east really for them. Cities. Image taken from Ken Burns' film about PBS about a family caught in the Dust Bowl. Canvas overhang for shelter. In the 1930s, farmers from the Midwest Dust Bowl states, especially Oklahoma and Arkansas, began to move to California. 250,000 arrived by 1940, including a third who moved to the San Joaquin Valley, which had 1930 population of 540,000, and not too soon after that it went to 2.5 million, from 540,000. What kind of living could they do? Well, okay. This is a scene from the Grapes of Wrath. You're leaving behind the dust on the way to California. At the double whammy of drought and depression deepened on the Great Plains, more and more farmers gave up or were forced off their land. In addition, the relentless march of new tractors meant that farmers who were able to scrape enough to buy a tractor could survive, but it was California Odyssey, trip to California. Here they hoped that the car did not break down as there was no money for repairs, hoping for better life. Where they got the water and all the other stuff, I don't know. That's another horrible scene. There's a family living out of a car. How long it took to get to California, I don't know. But about breakdowns and mechanics, I don't know. He's going to California in that machine from Oklahoma. Did not seem up for the trip to California. He had his bedding, he had the chairs I see there. California once advertised for more migrant workers, found themselves overwhelmed by up to 7,000 new migrants a month. This is the 1930s. More migrants than they needed, so several months, so in 1936, Long Island Police Department sent 136 deputies to the state to turn back migrants. Didn't have any money. Warning states like Arizona was so angry that California was trying to dump hobos. So you had states war. They're trying to dump hobos on me, Arizona said. But what could they do? They were broke. Model T with a cramped family. We all hope their children had happier lives. Struggle with the hardships, not being able to afford to buy food or find work. People were forced to leave their hometowns and migrate to more prosperous in the United parts of America. Not during the Depression, I don't know. There was a prosperous. This was a depression going on. Many people out of work was United States, unable to find jobs locally. So you hit the road. You can't find a job locally, you hit the road. This is California or bust. I think it's a museum piece. When they got there, jobs were difficult to get, and low wages due to many workers seeking the same position. The economic theory of wage deflation. Remember taking that in college, wage, and then taking this problem about when the workers got to California. Okay, many workers taking the same job, economic pressures came to play as wages became depressed. You get to California, they're going to give you $1 a day to pick oranges or peaches, whatever it is. Another guy, somebody with 3, 4, 5 kids says, I'll do it for 75 cents. So this is what happens, wage economics. Stuck on a rural road in Texas with no hope of repairing the car. The counties had little resources to aid. I think the caption I had when I took this out said, couldn't repair the car, so they walked away from that. Where do you walk? Dust Bowl migration, leave any way you can. The Dust Bowl conjures up images of dark dust clouds descending upon farmhouses. Harsh economic conditions. Migration westward or inevitable. Oklahoma contained less than an average contained less acreage designated by the Soil Conservation Service as being part of the Dust Bowl than Kansas, Colorado. But hit it, whether it's a lot or little, the economy went sour. That's the point to make here. Look, the whole family packed in that one car. Now, without windows, you know, the old cars. When the dust came, you couldn't keep the dust out of the cars. Here's a man, according to the caption, he just lost his farm. He has 7 of them there, 4, 5, 6. 6. And the only way he can leave is by walking away from the farm. Sad portrayal of the effects of eviction. A family with 4 children and without transportation, no safety net available except the federal government. Sheltered along their way to California. Not much, but something. They supplied a little metal stove, some wood there if you make tea or coffee, whatever it is. Something. This is the face of the greatest generation. The look of despair at an early age, wondering what the future will look like. No hope in sight. There's a young girl, probably tired as could be, dragging a blanket. A sad portrayal of sadness and the plunge into poverty. Get to California and pick cotton or oranges or peaches or grapes. Expand to other agricultural products such as lettuce and other greens. So you went there to pick, whether it was cotton, oranges, peaches, lettuce, some sort of a job. Children of the Dust Bowl. Life has always been hard on the farmers who live in Oklahoma and the surrounding areas of Texas, Kansas, and New Mexico, especially during the Great Depression. The Dust Bowl migration was the result of the battle between man and machine. The power of large landowners and giant corporations is represented by the tractor. I don't want to buy that, but while the hard-working tenant farmers and sharecroppers became refugees in their own country. Refugees in their own country. The Dust Bowl migration began in earnest in 1935 and peaked between 1930s and 1938. So three solid years of migration to the West Coast to pick fruit. Migration. Texas leaving for the barren plains for greener pastures. Penniless and in great debt to the banks. Land speculation was rampant before the Dust Bowl as grain prices soared with farm machines bought in larger crops, eventually creating oversupply. We went through that before. Texas was hard hit, and the trek to the west started slowly, then escalated to escape the persistent dust clouds, hitting the road with a few belongings. Many cars became dust and sandlogged, could not be used for transportation. Walk or hitch a ride was the only path out. The dust got into the motor. You couldn't use the motor. Got into the gas tank. Couldn't use the gas tank. Family hitchhiking. This is another sad picture. Part of the greatest generation that was toughened by the realities of the 1930s. The Grapes of Wrath. Scene from Oscar-winning film of 1940, portraying the Great Migration and the hardship that migrants faced. An Oscar-winning picture that sheds some light on the hardships that befell the migrants. Set during the Great Depression, the novel focuses on the Joads, J-O-A-D-S, poor family of tenant farmers, driven from their Oklahoma by drought, economic hardship, agricultural industry changes, and bank foreclosures, forcing tenant farmers out of work. Due to their nearly hopeless situation, in part because they were trapped in a dust bowl, Joe set out for California along with thousands of other Okies. They seek jobs and dignity. This is in the Grapes of Wrath. The Great Depression was going on, so that the nation and the streets teemed with homeless people, just as they do today. The newspapers are full of stories and worker layoff from farm foreclosures and bank failures, just as they are today. All that has changed, in my opinion, is that thanks to television, we can hide a Great Depression. We can't hide a Great Depression. We may even be hiding a Third World War. There were 14 dust storms in 1932 on the Great Plains. There were 38 dust storms in 1933 in the Great Plains. Estimated that 2 million people became homeless because of the Dust Bowl and the damage it did to their farms. And about 6,500 people were killed during the dust storms in 1 year. Little or no hope after losing the farm and foreclosed on. Look at the despair and sadness and heart-wrenching. That's a heart-wrenching picture also. There's a ballad there. I don't want to sing it now. I don't have a voice to sing, but Arlo, what's his name?
Guthrie.
Arlo Guthrie sang this song. Now,
this is Woody Guthrie.
Oh, that's it, Woody Guthrie. I got the words here, but I want to sing it. Migrant pea pickers in California, probably just enough to feed a family in the short term. Wage economics came to play as workers agreed to work for lower pay just to get a day's work. Some economics note that most of the techniques of human organization employed on factory workers during the industrial were first developed in other words, they went from the slave plantations, that theory, to this. Okay, I think I should take, all right, we'll cut it off there. We'll take some questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Si.
I'm having trouble with my eyes. My eyes are going. I'm at the beginning of macular degeneration. I see
some of the most iconic photographs of the Great Migration were taken by photographers hired by the Roosevelt administration, the Farm Bureau. They sent a team of photographers to the Dust Bowl to take photographs. Two of the photographs you didn't show. One was by Dorothea Lange, the other one was by Arthur Rothstein. And they were iconic photographs of the Great Migration and the Great Depression also. And thanks to the Roosevelt administration, we have these photos that were taken by these photographers who went down there to record the disaster that was happening in America.
There were lots of photographs. You know, you do an hour presentation, an hour. You can't. On Google, has tons and tons and tons of those photographs. Yeah. Tons. Thing is, you got to say how many you want to put on there. You want to make your point. I think I had enough photographs to make a point. To make a point. That was it. I know, I'm not kidding. But yeah, I just wanted enough to make a point. The point, it was a ruthless time of our history. I mean, the starvation, the Great Migration, and you also economic wage economics, and you had, you know, and how they got greedy with the mechanical plow, and more to plow more. They knew they were not supposed to plow more and more, but they did anyway. You know.
What happened to the people who remained on the farms?
Died.
Nothing much written about that, but there's nothing they could do. They were on welfare. There's nothing much they could do.
They managed it.
World War II brought a lot back.
Yeah.
Brought a lot back. And I got a chart near the end that I'm going to show about unemployment during the Roosevelt administration. You see that point, after World War II, went way up, employment. Yes, back then.
What did the New Deal programs with WPA and CCC do to alleviate the problem?
Yes, there's a lot. I got on the next session. I got a whole bunch of those programs. The Farm Bureau, Agricultural Adjustment Act. There's about a good 10 dozen programs that they used. That's for the next week's presentation. You know, but there's a lot there. There's a lot there. He did a lot. As I said, because we were a credit of the nation. If it happened today, I don't know what we would do. If it happened today, and you had a depression and something like this, where would the money come from?
With the floods, the same.
You print it. Then you have, I pray, so that was the idea of being a credit of the nation. You have the leeway, you have the room to borrow.
Well, when
When you're a debtor nation, as we are, I don't know if we could borrow anymore.
Or you can borrow because the cows come.
Yeah. Who's going to pay for it? Yes.
How many people were
I
affected?
can't, I'm like,
How many people, from the Dust Bowl lost their mortgages, their farms? How does that compare to the recent stock market decline when all these other people lost their houses because of the crookedness of the banks and everything?
an interesting question, but it would cause more misery then because they didn't have many programs. Today, even if you lost your house, you got some sort of program. You know, you're not going to starve. They were starving to death.
Why did they go west? So they had family in the east, and some come back to their families in the east?
Well, they went west.
They only went to California primarily, not coming to the east a little
At the
bit.
beginning, California encouraged them. But there were a lot of, California's a great agricultural nation. They needed like seasonal, they needed to pick the grapes and to pick the peas and to pick the cotton. But they only needed it for a season. Now what do you do with them sitting there? 3 million people sitting there, you need it for a season. Then what do you do with them? But California encouraged them to come. And they needed them. They needed them.
Right, cool.
But then again, without the union and protection all, then you had wage economics. Well, you fought one against the other.
Was there any warnings prior to the Dust Bowl that they were doing wrong? I mean, you look at the bottle, we said it goes over take your crops, overgrow, this and that, and no one paid attention.
No one paid attention. Yes, Lou.
In answer to Lowell's question, your eastern states had been developed, and they weren't in such bad straits as the western states. In the western states, they still had a lot of undeveloped land. So from
That's
the
right.
Dust Bowl, they went west because they had a lot of open land still that they were able to settle on.
Now, these people are basically farmers. They wouldn't get lost in the city. You notice that they migrated to other agricultural areas, not to the cities. I think they would be lost in the city. Yes.
I assume that next time you give the next presentation to this, you will be able to show what happens to these people.
I got a few, yes, in there, on the farms. And like the grapes are red, I got a few in there. We'll portray that next
As
time.
time goes on, how do they progress and how do they survive?
Well, I got names in there that people who rode the railroads. I'll get you in a minute. That rode the railroads, including a former Supreme Court justice. to get out. And a few people of note were, just had to get out, they got anywhere they can, they became hobos on the railroad, and then they become very important people, so including a Supreme Court justice, you get out, then you try to make a life somewhere, yes.
Yeah, you said there was like an 8-year drought.
The what?
There was an 8-year drought that started the dust bowl business.
There was a drought and overproduction of land, and getting rid of the soil that held the water in. Well, they got rid of the prairie grasses are not susceptible to dust. They hold the water in even during a drought. They brought the mechanical plow came along, and they were making money. And they were making money with wheat. The demands of wheat went up like crazy. Then you got rid of that prairie grass. Then you get a drought, nothing to protect it, nothing to protect the soil. It just gets swept away with the wind. Anything else?
Okay.
All right.